Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the entrepreneurial scale-up system and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from each other's experiences. I'm Granger Forson, and on this episode of the show, I'm joined by Danny Matthews of Short Story Ventures. Today, we're diving into the transformative power of focusing on problem solving, strategic pricing, and fostering autonomy within your teams. These are crucial elements that have propelled Danny's Ventures studio to the forefront of the startup success industry. To ensure you don't miss any inspirational future episodes, do subscribe to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to our podcasts. Also, you can nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up journey. You can find out how in the show notes. So let's now go over and dive into the inspiring journey of Pokemon, problem solving, value creation, and team autonomy with Danny Matthews. Hello, Danny Matthews. Welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks for having me. I come across people all the time that believe that they should be the change that they want to see in the world. And I believe that right now, this is the best time ever to start a business. And I think a business is the best way to become the change you want to see in the world. So my name is Danny Matthews. I'm the founder of Short Story Ventures. We're a venture studio, which basically means that we help very early stage startups to build a fundable startup brand, gain traction, and get to market. I'm very lucky that over the years, I fought to do this. This is really my passion. I love helping startups. And over the years, I've been very lucky to put my money where my mouth is, as some people would say, and invest in 4 businesses. I also advise 2 startups, and I help around 100 startups get to market every year as a director of Founder Institute, which is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. So my life revolves around mainly technology, but also I have a passion for living off the land and a long-term vision to change my lifestyle in that way. So that is me.
Wow. We're going to unpack all of those different elements in there. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. Fantastic. So Short Story Ventures, yeah. Okay, let's help with startups. Let's talk about that. How I always talk about how do you delight your customers. So yeah, we know what our customer is a startup, but okay, why do they come to you? How do they get involved with you? And what sort of things do you do to make them successful?
Yeah, so really early stage startup founders are usually at the stage when I talk to them where they've done a little bit of work, they've started to figure out what the solution is they want to put out in the world, but most of the time what they haven't done is obsess over the problem. And so many very early stage founders will go and they will start to build a solution without really understanding where it fits in the market. So the work that I would usually do with a founder is anything from, I say that Short Story Ventures is a venture studio. It didn't start like that, but what we've become is kind of a bit of a Frankenstein of a creative agency. So we focus very much on the brand design element of startups. Also a venture capital firm. So we do like to invest, whether it's time for sweat equity or whether it's money, into these companies that we believe in. But also there is an element of it that we are an accelerator. So although I'm an accelerator externally for another company, essentially I'll run the business that way. So we operate in sprints. So for anyone who's ever built software or done project management, we do 1-week brand sprints. So whether that's around building your story and your messaging or your identity, or getting traction by building things like landing pages and waiting lists and content and things like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a Frankenstein, but I think Venture Studio describes it perfectly of what it's kind of become over the years.
Oh yes, I know fully about sprints. Introduced Agile to a software team that I took over once. But anyway, that's in my past, but I still use sprint ideas and structures around that. So a new startup, how would they get in? Why would they even come looking for you? How do they know that you exist? To get that first. All right, I've got an idea, but why would they? How would they come looking for you?
Many founders start off becoming aware of me either through the accelerators, through podcasts like this, or through meeting them on LinkedIn, for example.
Yeah.
And the reason that they usually get in touch or we start a conversation is because I say something that they probably haven't heard before, or they don't hear very often. And it's quite an important point because I think Silicon Valley's got a lot to answer for. They have essentially built this ecosystem and this assumption that if you've got an idea, you can go and raise millions for it and you will do really, really well. But there's plenty of companies that have raised a few million and died, and they haven't lasted. 99% of them, to put a number on it. And I think that's because we often see the glamorous side of building a business, especially in a Silicon Valley ecosystem where it's glamorized to raise money instead of building a business and starting to build revenue, for example. So a lot of the times we miss out the really important stage of building a business, which is the stage where you validate if it's even wanted in a market. You know, if we look at the reasons that businesses fail, the reason that is at the top has nothing to do with running out of money or not having the skills or expertise. It's actually just that the market doesn't want it. So very often I start talking to founders because I introduce this concept way before product market fit, which is what they're looking for, or to build a product so people can test it, for example. And instead I introduce them to the concept of problem solution fit, where they can start obsessing over what the problem is and allow the solution to present itself, or be very solution agnostic and be open to what that could be. But unfortunately, what most founders do is say, I have a solution, let's go figure out if there's a problem for it, and they do it the other way around. So hopefully I start talking sense to founders and they decide that actually they would rather do it that way and reduce their risk. And you know, through the process, often open up opportunities to bootstrap and do it without funding. And build an actual business that's generating revenue instead of getting investment.
Yeah, and revenue is the key. You know, without
cash is king and queen and prince and god and whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, and without building a business that's bringing in money at the top end, you can't pay for anything throughout the rest of the.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's a cultural thing in this. So it's really fascinating. I also get involved in other accelerators and on the Founder Institute program that I run, you know, we have people from all over the world. So we do have people from America and Africa very often, and Eastern Europe and Asia sometimes. And it's really interesting, the cultural difference. So I'm a mentor for a accelerator at the moment that's helping Ukrainian startups come to the UK and launch here. And I'm talking to some of these startups, and it's fascinating how, I think because of the situation in Ukraine and that they're in conflict and in a war, their mindset around building a business is very different. So I'm talking to founders that are at a similar stage to those in the program that I'm part of, but these are businesses that are doing $130,000 monthly recurring revenue without raising any money. And they're basically saying, we just want to launch in the UK now because we've already got a little bit of market traction. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you get Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and early stage founders in the program that I'm part of, the Founder Institute, that are zero revenue. And they're trying to raise money to build a thing that might solve a problem that they haven't explored yet.
Yeah.
So and I think there's a cultural thing there, you know, being in conflict and war is giving these entrepreneurs real drive and motivation to give themselves leverage to be able to say, I want to expand into the UK or the US, and look what we've done so far. So it's fascinating actually being part of that world and seeing how they treat it in different parts of the world.
And is that partly because, you know, just thinking out loud, but you know, some people are thinking about an exit strategy before they've even built the business, where others are actually living in their business and feeling the day-to-day activity of what it is to do a business and put food on the plate.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I said that there's four things that investors are looking for in a startup. And the first thing is an alignment of origin, vision, and mission. And you could refer to this as passion. So when a startup founder is excited about something, you can be excited about something, but it doesn't mean that it will work in the long term. It doesn't mean that you'll be able to fight through the hard times as well as the good times. Like it doesn't build resilience. And I think if you can align something, your life experience, to a big problem that you want to solve in the future, and you have a general idea of the steps you can take to do that with whatever solution you're going to come up with, that alignment in your origin, your vision, and your mission is a massive, powerful way to make sure you stay on track, you build resilience, you fight through the hard times, because you're not building for an exit. You're building because you know it's the right thing to do and that there's a big problem to be solved. And I think that's the difference. So, I say maybe it's cultural, but maybe that's it. Maybe it's just a mindset thing that they need to figure out something that doesn't seem to be just a good idea, but actually something that aligns with who they are and the experience they've had in life.
Yeah. And those are the 4 things, the alignment, origin, vision, and mission? Or?
No, that's just one. That's the first thing.
What I thought.
Yeah. So the first is so investors are really looking for in early stage founders. They're really looking for an alignment in origin, mission, vision, and mission. They're looking for a compelling brand story. Now that's very different from an origin story. And I think that it gets mixed up very often. So a brand story is really the story you're telling. It's really the story you want to change in the world. So very often I tell people, get an A4 piece of paper, fold it in half, and on one side of the piece of paper, I want you to write the story of how things are right now, relating to the problem you want to solve. And then on the other side, I want you to write the same story. But this time I want you to write it as if the problem has been solved. You are successful, the vision is reached, the mission has been accomplished. What does the world look like then? And that contrast in story is a really good way to contextualize the problem and be able to tell a story from the end user, customer, potential investor, tell it from their point of view. And that's what builds a compelling story, because all of a sudden you're telling a story that people want to become part of. You're not just telling a story about yourself and how good you are and what ideas that you have and how you're going to go and execute it in the market. It's really playing on that 50% of the brain that is emotional rather than habit or logical. So that's number 2, brand story. Number 3 is around traction. So traction is simply data plus a promise. So that could be a waiting list. That could be people that are pre-ordering from you. It could be a crowdfunding campaign where people have pledged to pay you as and when it launches and it goes live. It could be a contract with an enterprise, for example. But what we're looking for is not just data. We're looking for data plus a promise. So, and that's really important. If you have one, it's no way as strong as the other. But there are times where you can build a waiting list of 4,000 people and investor that will be attractive to one investor, or you can have pre-orders from 57 people. You're a revenue generating business, albeit you haven't gathered the money yet, and that is just as attractive to an investor. So you've got to have the alignment in your origin, vision, and mission. You have to have a compelling brand story. You have to have some kind of traction, and then the last one is you need to be able to set a great first impression. Now, most of that will be done for you with the first 3. But if you want to make a really good first impression, you have to align how you communicate to investors and your potential customers with how you communicate visually as well. So that's where the design element comes into how you look as a brand. And they're the 4 things.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, they're really detailed thinking then for all those new startups out there that are doing thinking about what comes next and how they're going to take their idea to marketplace. So brilliant. Let's talk about your business. Yeah, and we're about learning the journeys and what we go through and the experience of it. So how big a business are you? How long have you been going?
So my business, I started as a freelance graphic designer, and that was around 6 years ago. What was really interesting is I'd come out of 10 years of running a financial services business. amongst other failed ventures, which we can go down the list if you want to. But really, my focus was on graphic design, and what I realized is that there are graphic designers that focus on aesthetics and visuals, and there are graphic designers that need a certain amount of information in order to do a really good job. And what most of that information is what we understand as branding. And I don't mean that as in a visual sense, but understanding your target market and your competitors and your business plan, essentially. And it all filters into how a designer takes that into consideration and how they communicate to who are your target market. So I started as a graphic designer. I very quickly realized that design was a skill I had, completely self-taught, never trained. But it was a skill I had, but it wasn't where the value was, I think, in the business. And actually having run a business and hired people and built teams and done all the operations and sales and marketing and as little finance as I possibly could, if it was my choice. Having all of that experience meant that I could really relate to business owners. So I understood the information I needed to do a really good job. And what I found is that most people couldn't give it to me. They couldn't tell me who the target market was, and they couldn't clearly tell me why what they did solved a problem in the market. And I found that really fascinating. So I very quickly realized this whole world of branding, brand strategy, and how it filtered into design. So I started to build the business as more of an agency rather than just being a freelancer. And then COVID hit, of course. And I had a really clear idea of what I wanted the business to become. And so I hired 8 people through the Kickstart scheme. And we built a creative team of illustrators, designers, copywriters, customer success, video editors, you name it, and spent 6 months building an agency, essentially. And yeah, so that was the business up until then. And obviously since then we've transitioned into this venture studio. So you can dig into that and pick apart whatever you need to. But it's definitely been an interesting journey.
So this is how many businesses now? This is number 3.
This is I guess this is the 3rd iteration of the business.
Okay.
From freelance to agency to venture studio, but essentially it's the same business.
Yeah, and before that, you talked about the business didn't succeed. Is that or didn't?
Oh yeah. So for looking back, it's really interesting when I look back. I grew up in a place called Coventry, which if you've never been to Coventry and you've never heard of it, many years ago they used to send people there to hang them, which tells you a little bit about why I left. Dangerous place, Coventry. It's not really. There's some fascinating parts of it. So I grew up in Coventry. I went to a all-boys public school called the Woodlands. And at the time, they were trying to become a sports academy. And so I really felt at the time that there was no support or encouragement to do what I wanted to do, which was creative arts, design, theatre, if you like. So like most people, I left and I went and got a job. Also, at the same time, there was some trouble in my household. So I left home in my early teens, very luckily picked up by my friend's parents, who saved me from going homeless. And as soon as I left school and as soon as I could, I left their home as well. And I moved to Birmingham, where I started my career, my real career. And I did a load of jobs and I tried a bunch of things, but I felt that I was always reaching out for something creative. So at one point I took an opportunity to become a tattoo artist and I trained as a tattoo artist for a couple of years and ran a shop in Birmingham with someone else. The tattoo industry was very different back then than it is now. Now it's very much a cultural significance. It's a little bit like the coffee scene. It's like tattoos and coffee and barbershop kind of cultural significance. But yeah, back then it was an excuse for me to be creative and everyone else to do deals out the back door for whatever they were doing. Yeah. So after a couple of years, that kind of died off and I had to get out of risky situations. So I moved on. and tried to start a few businesses, through one of them through the Prince's Trust, which was really interesting. And yeah, there's been many tried and failed attempts at doing this thing. And it was only when I eventually got a job in private medical insurance, working for a sales agent as a broker, I found something that I actually really enjoyed. And that started a little bit of a spark in me to figure out how I do this as a business going forward, I guess. So we can dig into that if you like.
Yeah. So you've built a business. You're now building a new business. This business is more around some of the passion and drive that you have, which is, focusing on brand and brand identity. And it's evolved now into this venture capitalists in lots of different feeds, but all focusing on startups. So let's talk about, you've employed people, you've built businesses. Give us some of that. What have you learned over the years about why a small business growth, why it fails, and how you have now adapted and learned to put that into your new business?
Yeah. So for me, the transition from financial services into the business that I'm running now came at quite a cost. There was an episode of burnout, which was really terrible for not only what I was doing at the time, the project and my career, but also my health, my self-esteem, my confidence. And actually, it took a lot to go out and be a freelancer and start a business again. What I very quickly found is that I hired what I believe is called a mindset coach at the time. And I worked through some things that I never knew existed. And one of those was my mindset around money and a bunch of other things. And I wish that there was some kind of education around this, because I think that flicked a switch in me that helped me understand maybe why businesses hadn't succeeded before, or what I needed to do. So I think one of the great things I did was get support very, very early on. And but one of the mistakes I made, and I think it relates to the same thing about money mindset and scarcity and abundance, is I was very wary of charging too much money, or I didn't really understand the market. I was new to graphic design, and I had to figure it out. And actually, to some extent, I was fortunate I had an episode of burnout that affected me so badly, because I had nothing to lose at that point, and I could have tried anything. But what I did try was, I thought, why don't I just try doubling my prices every time someone inquired? And it was one of the best things I ever did. So if you can ever put yourself in the mindset of having nothing to lose, there's a great concept that if you haven't heard of him, there's a great concept that Daniel Priestley talks about, and it's this with or without you energy, and it's this kind of aura, or this energy that you give off that you don't need it. And that you're taking control of the situation or the business or your mindset. And with or without you energy, I found to be really powerful. So at that point, I genuinely didn't have anything to lose. So it's a bit easier for me from a mindset point of view, but for others, maybe more difficult. But so I just said, how do I start a business in graphic design? How do I test the market? How do I price it? There were so many questions. So what I decided to do was to sign up to a 30-day logo challenge. These are very common for designers that are just entering the market or going freelance. And you basically put your email address into a website, and it sends you an email every day with a brief for a logo design. So I did that, and I think it was day 8, I had a couple of people inquiring and saying, can you do this for me? And I decided, as I said, I would double the price every time someone inquired, until they said no, to the point where I couldn't pay my bills. Granger, where do you think I got to in terms of what I was charging before someone said no? to the point where I couldn't pay my bills.
Probably about 10 times.
Almost. I got to 12.5 grand. And that was probably more valuable than any money I could have paid my mindset coach. Because it was something I tried myself. I just went out there and did it. There was stuff that happened along the way that wasn't very nice, some difficult conversations. I'm not very good at conflict. So there were times where I had to, difficult clients or whatever, and I had to learn through that. But it was one of the best things I ever did, because it helped me to very, very quickly, we're talking 6 weeks, it helped me to very, very quickly realize my value in the real world. Not my perception, not because one person decided to work with me and others didn't, but because all of them decided to work with me. So I think the first logo I did was £150. So I literally went 150, 300, 600, 1200, 2.5 grand, 5 grand, 10 grand. And then I got to 20 grand and they said no. And I said 15 and they said no. And I said 13 and they said 12.5 and we'll do it. So I did it, and that was that was actually my first adventure into the startup world, because it was a brand new company.
Yeah. Wow. That's brilliant, Danny. I mean, that's amazing. I often talk about pricing with clients, and we talk about putting it up and testing the marketplace until the point where it says no, or you feel physically sick, around that, to go from 150 quid to 12.5 grand. Well done. Fantastic. Wow. Not met anybody that has achieved that and done that, but well done. So, yeah. So pricing, but you brought on a team. Burnout often in business owners is around how to manage a team and organize a team and get people, find the right people and get the people focused on the right things. So you've done that, and now you've got a team. You Kickstarters. They're a team of almost novices completely. So
yeah, exactly.
What did you learn about teams, and what are you doing differently today in your new business?
Well, Granger, I'm glad you bring it up. So something really interesting happened when I started hiring. I got really interested, actually probably driven by fear, in all honesty. I got very interested in, I'm about to take on 8 people. I've never done this before for my own business. I've managed a small team for an employer, but I've never done this for my own business. I now have to pay these people. Yes, the Kickstarter scheme meant that it was partially funded by the government, which was, great. It was low risk, but I'd never managed a team in my own business before, and I was kind of terrified. So being, let's call it being an entrepreneur, I went straight to, where can I go to learn this from the best people in the world about managing a team? And I read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and followed all the people online and read all the blogs. I came across this two specific, actually, let's do three specific books. One of them was Extreme Trust by 2 people called Don Peppers and Martha Rogers, an incredible book that tells story and case study after case study about how to build trust with consumers in a way that is completely foolproof. It's a very, very smart book. These are books that I think are the best books no one's ever heard of, right? So everyone talks about the same lean startup and things like that, right? But they've never heard of these. Maybe this one. So the second one is Traction by Gino Wickman. And that is a book about implementing what's called an entrepreneurial operating system.
Yeah.
A really, really smart guy, an amazing way to structure teams and companies and for high performance. And then I read a book called Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It by 2 ladies in America, Callie Ressler and Jodie Thompson. And it introduced this concept that was tried as a case study in the book with Best Buy in the US in 2008. And a light switch went on and a penny dropped. And I I realized that the reason that I was so unhappy with employment my entire life to that point is because of the concept in the book, which is basically the world in the industrial age, the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 work week was implemented to stop slavery. But since then, we've gone through industrial age, digital age. We now live in a global economy, and it now no longer makes sense to judge how work gets done by time or location. And so this was far before COVID, which I think people thought COVID was kind of a trigger for remote working.
Yeah.
And I've got a bit of a gripe with people calling it work from home, because we were forced to work from home. We didn't have a choice. And now people think they have to work from home, but they don't. You can go anywhere. If you work remotely, you can go anywhere. So the concept in the book that the company Culture RX created is called a results-only work environment. So I decided that I was going to implement the results-only work environment in my business with these 8 employees. Now, to summarize a results-only work environment, imagine a workplace where you're not judged by where work gets done or when work gets done. And instead you focus on getting the work done. And that's all. Initially it was described as do it where you want, when you want, as long as the work is done. And since then it's been developed into another way to describe it, because that got a little bit of negative connotation. And now it's referred to as 100% autonomy and 100% accountability. And what that means is that you hire someone to do a job, you give them a result that is required, and then you let go of the judgment of how, when and where work gets done, and instead focus on getting the results. And that was a huge change for me, game changer for me. All of a sudden, it validated why I was so unhappy for so many years in employment. It validated why I felt like I needed to be self-employed or I needed to run a business, because I could control those elements. I can control the results, and it doesn't matter where or when I do it. Obviously, it brings up questions around retail and production and different environments, because I ran a digital business, but the principle is the same. So yeah, I got very passionate about this, and it still is. I still have conversations with Culture RX about this. We're talking about doing a pilot of this with some companies in the UK, because they're a US company, and something that I've built some real passion around. So the biggest thing I learned through hiring people is that the workplace is broken and it needs fixing, and hybrid or work from home or core hours is not going to fix it. It's a band-aid to a huge problem that needs an operation, basically. Yes.
And all of those, industrial revolution, everything you're talking about, is all about control.
Yes, exactly.
It's not about work, it's about control. And when we get that out of our minds, then we can actually liberate everything that we can do in the workplace.
Yeah.
Give us a brief understanding, because the time is flying by. And really, this amazing conversation. Thank you, Danny. Give us a brief understanding then. How does the team net together, and how do you get this 100% autonomy and 100% accountability across your team without worrying about time and control?
So first of all, we have to change our mindset. We have to change our mindset around the assumption that work gets done in a place. So because someone is in an office, they're working, because you'll find that many times they're not. I had an experience in an old sales environment where names are made up to protect identities, for what I'm going to say. But Darren would come in at 8:30 a.m., leave at 6:45 p.m. Jenny would come in at 9 a.m. and she would finish at 5 p.m. Jenny exceeds her targets every single month. Darren does not. Who gets promoted? Darren, because he's a hard worker.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. We have to change our assumption about how work gets done and where it gets done. Just because Darren is at his desk doesn't mean work's getting done.
Yeah.
The second is the time that work gets done. We need to change from this mindset of you owe me your time because that's what I'm paying you for, to you owe me your best work, and it doesn't matter what time you do that. So we have to, in a nutshell, we have to change our mindset around how work gets done and the assumption that people want to be part of a team. Now, this is probably going to ruffle a few feathers, but it's definitely true in my experience. People don't want to be part of a team. Most people, if they were given the choice, they would do their work, whatever they needed to get done, at whatever time of day they wanted to, and they would go swimming or running, or they would play with their dog or their children. They would live their life how they want to live their life, and they would still give you their best work on their terms. So we have to change our mindset around the judgment we judge people with about how work gets done to something that eradicates the location and time.
And so give us, how does that work within the team? Because within your business, you still need, we still need that spirit of when we come together and that connection, and doing that, we still need to know what work needs to be done and what best work is. How does that work within your agency?
So very often, these kind of conversations with other companies and businesses will uncover or expose something that is probably not being done. For example, metrics. It's very surprising to me how many companies don't have KPIs or metrics that they measure results in the business by. But we do. So we know that in order to get 4 people on a brand sprint every month, we have to talk to 22 people. In order to talk to 22 people as booked appointments, we know that we're going to have to communicate by chat, message, email with, I think, 81 people. And in order to get 81 people to start a conversation, we have to post so many times on social media. We have to reach out to people so many times a day. We actually have metrics. So unlike many companies that hire someone for a particular job, like account management, and they end up doing maybe a few different things, a little bit of customer service, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This team is hired to do a job, one job. So a video editor is hired to do one job, to edit videos that we record and to make sure that they're published how many times a week, for example, on which platforms, which means that they're reliant on copywriters and designers for thumbnails and things. So everyone knows what work they need to get done. And that's where we focus. We focus on the work getting done. So the decisions that we make and how we communicate is decided by the work that needs to get done, not the time people are working or the place people are working. So that means that everyone in the team, no matter where they are, they do their job. And if they need something, they communicate. And it means that we change the way that we communicate by email. For example, one of the very simple changes I think everyone who's listening to this podcast can make is when you send an email, tell people when they need to respond. And that would change so much for you. You wouldn't have to chase people. People would know when to respond. They would know the result that they need to get, and it wouldn't matter when they do it. Yeah. And so we need to treat employees like clients almost, right?
I actually advocate to having no internal emails.
Yes.
You talk about work. Actually, work is about then getting tasks done. So actually have a task management system, that everybody involves with, and use a task management system for managing 90% of what actually emails are all about in a business. And you can get rid of emails completely, almost completely. So,
almost, yeah. So it's just about implementing and sharing expectations about the work and how the work gets done. And if you ever find yourself talking about when or where, stop yourself and think, do we actually need to do this? There's a really useful part of the book of why work sucks and how to fix it, and they're called guideposts. So there's 13 guideposts, and instead of it being a set of rules, it's almost like a list of things of how to spot a results only work environment. So there's things like every meeting is optional, every day is a Saturday, but there's also things like there's no work schedules, and a very important one, which is you must call out anyone at any level in the company that isn't following these guideposts. And I've been caught out. I've been caught out a few times where I've turned up to a meeting and said, oh, sorry, I'm a few minutes late, guys. I was up last night just working on that proposal or whatever. And they've said, you're not allowed to say that, because how do you think we feel when you are basically saying you're working all the hours and you're asking us to get a result and not to work all the hours, right? How do you think we feel when you're judging us based on when we're working or how long we're working for, instead of actually getting the work done? And so it was I call it an experiment. It was an amazing experiment to run. It taught me so much about what's wrong with the world of work, and really lit a fire in me to share the message of Culture RX and the results only work environment.
Wow, fantastic. No, I love that. And that's part of the reason I left corporate world and then set my own business up. And what I'm doing is really, my business partner and I is building a culture around, not quite what you're talking about, so we're going to research it, but really sort of understanding how work can be really joyful and take you forward, because it's a passion of working rather than actually just something that you do. Yeah, and lots of things are repetitive. But actually, they're also joyful when you get them right. So, one final little thing, we talked about in the preparation for this around you being a runner-up for Game Boy Pokemon competition. Yeah, I mean, Pokemon and the discipline of doing that, but also the exploration throughout Pokemon and the game, etc. Fantastic. Runner up for that. How do you think that gave you some thinking about business life that you're now in?
Just thank you for bringing it up. It's often the thing, when people say, tell us something that we don't know about you or whatever, it's often the thing that I think of, because in my kind of professional life, whenever anything got a little bit serious, hitting targets or running a business or having a difficult client or whatever, things like Pokemon, I grew up on Japanese animated film. I'm a big fan of a guy called Hayao Miyazaki that did a lot of films with Studio Ghibli. Things like that and Pokemon is a real reminder to me that about the fun that we should be having. And it's often a nice reminder that it doesn't have to be serious all the time. You can have a little bit of fun and you can have a bit of imagination. And so I still think to this day, I can't wait till my kids get old enough to do Pokemon cards again, because I'm in as well, gives me an excuse. But I still think Pokemon's one of the greatest creations, the most imaginative creations, because now understanding a little bit about neuroscience and behavior, Pokemon really taps into the idea that this could become real. It taps into this habitual, age-old thing of having a companion, like a dog or a cat or a pet in some way, but that being a guide to you achieving your dreams. The story of Ash Ketchum is actually quite amazing. This is a guy who grew up in a small town, pallet town, where no one knew him, and he went on an adventure with an animal that could essentially guide him through to achieving his big vision, which is to become a Pokemon master and a great Pokemon trainer. And along that way, he gets taken through, different stories and beating gym leaders and all kinds of stuff. So it's often a reminder that life is a bit of a journey. And as long as you've got the right guide and the right people around you, don't forget to have fun along the way. Yeah. There'll be plenty of ups and downs, but Pikachu by your side, you'll be fine.
Yes, a companion and a guide, and often we need different types of guides depending on the different moments in life. And you've explained that beautifully through this conversation. So let's meet up in 5 years' time. Let's have a coffee rather than over Zoom and do this recording. But let's actually meet and let's reflect back on the 5 years that have passed. What's happened both professionally and personally for you to make those 5 years really successful?
In the last couple of years, I have realized that Short Story Ventures is really my life's work. I'm able to, I haven't mentioned it actually, but a lot of the work I do for Founder Institute and the Accelerator, I gain equity in all of the companies that graduate, which means that over the next 10, 15, 20 years, I'm going to have equity in 300 to 400 companies. And one of those, I hope, will have great success and will pay off, and I will have a little pot for the kids. If we're sitting having a coffee in 5 years, what I'd like to happen is that Short Story Ventures has become a machine or something that people go to and use often to make their vision a reality, essentially, but at the same time solving a big problem that needs to be solved and advancing humanity creatively, which is what I call it. But me personally, me and my wife are very interested in sustainability and self-sufficiency. So in 5 years' time, I'm hoping, Granger, that we'll be having a coffee outside my cabin on my land, looking over the fruit and vegetables and flowers that we self-grow for our farm, shop and cafe, and my wife's florist business is what I hope is going to be there in 5 years. So that's kind of the longer term vision.
Wow. Danny, thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. We never know where these chance moments will go and how we'll steer through. But we started off with understanding what you do as a business and how that really sort of helps startups really understand that real focus of it's not about investment for money, but actually driving revenue. So important, having that problem first before the solution, putting the cart before the horse. Maybe some people get that wrong, but those four things about getting that alignment and origin story really understood, that compelling brand story, that traction. Absolutely. Have you actually got a waiting client list for doing that? Yeah. And that first impression when you're going for that money that you're trying to do to get that investment for doing that, and how you help these entrepreneurs really understand that and bring that out and make that come alive. And then, we talked into your own origin story, where you came from and how that engineered into what you've created and started building, that you've taken lots of different gambles throughout that process. Amazing conversation about price and doubling your price and doubling your price. And well done. That's absolutely stunning for doing that. But, reflecting on team management and what you've done to actually really understand when people have problems. When we have problems, I often talk about go and find enlightenment. And you found that enlightenment within the books that you read. You reached out to those individuals that do it and said, this needs to be organized in our business, and taking that gamble and doing that, but by practicing it. And then by practicing and experimenting, you find that solution. And what you've done with the team and the structure and building that around and building that new team way of working, I think is absolutely amazing, absolutely delightful to hear that really does. And bringing it back to childhood and Pokemon, and how actually when lots of key things in life we maybe don't realize setting us up for our future life, that need with us to go on a journey, to experience, to grow, to have challenges. And it's challenges that really help us grow in doing that. But sometimes in those challenges, we need a guide. We need somebody to help us to really understand that, not to give us the solutions. And that's the most important thing. That's what's come out from this. You've never really talked about giving anybody the solution. You've talked about giving them the guide, giving them the direction, helping them achieve, helping them deliver. And, your amazing 5-year plan, I look really forward to meeting you and having a coffee and looking at those beautiful flowers and vegetables that you're growing. So thank you so much for this conversation. We always finish with a quick fire round, if I may. So if you were to go back to your younger self, which you did talk about today, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would say this sounds really cheesy, doesn't it? But if you really love something, or you have a passion or a hobby that you want to pursue, go and do it. When I was younger, it possibly wasn't possible. I don't know, but people nowadays have so much opportunity. I find it fascinating that young people today feel so restricted by their career options, when actually there's kids that are 5 years old that are opening toys on YouTube and earning $23 million a year. There is so much opportunity if you just do what you need to do to test and see if it is an opportunity to run a business and to manage yourself and your time and those things.
Books, you've mentioned 3 already. Any other books that you would recommend?
My top 3 are those 3. If I had to add one, it would be Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, which has an amazing structure to building a brand story and that kind of thing for sales and marketing.
Yeah, brilliant. Podcasts? Any podcasts you recommend?
I'm a bit of a neuro geek, so I quite like the Huberman Lab. So let's say Huberman Lab.
Brilliant. On your mobile phone, any apps that make a difference for you?
Probably Zero. It keeps me in line, sending invoices and that kind of thing. Probably that.
Brilliant. My favorite question of all: who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
Oh wow. I'm going to say my wife. Because despite the fact that she may not be perceived as a leader or a business chief executive or anything like that, she has been the number one source of support, encouragement, direction. She has been my Pikachu, if we use that analogy. And I would absolutely not be here if it wasn't for her. Personally, health-wise, professionally, she's got a lot to answer for, that lady.
Brilliant, thank you. Your most successful marketing tactic or lead generation?
Create a legitimate capacity. Figure out what your capacity is. It will give you clarity on how much business you can actually deal with and how much money you want to earn, and let that drive you over pricing, over everything. Set an official capacity is my biggest thing there.
Brilliant. And then finally, Danny, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, the best way, if you want to follow content and if you're interested in startups or building a startup, go and connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. You'll find me under the actual Danny, or just type my name, Danny Matthews, you'll find me. I'm happy for you to email. It's hello@shortstoryventures.com. That's probably the best way.
Brilliant. Well, Danny, thank you for a fantastic conversation today.
Thank you. It's been fascinating for me even. Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.